Welcome back to Petty Astrology. I'm your host, Kaycee Felton-Lui, and this is our Season 2 finale. If you can believe it, I know. This is episode 23 of this season, so it's been quite a road. And we just had that Sagittarius full moon last week, May 23rd, and I knew it was going to be a big one, but it really was a big one. It was a big chapter of my life closing, and that's a lot to process. It's a lot of energy. These transits are a lot of energy. So if you're anything like me, you might have been feeling a little bit more tired lately. There's just a lot going on. There's obviously a lot to process that we're witnessing, and hopefully those of us who can are doing whatever is in our power to help put a stop to the horrible things that we're witnessing. And it's not that the things that are occurring now are necessarily unique to this time period. Unfortunately, human beings have done a lot of damage over the years, and it's not all been damage. I am not one of those people that thinks that human beings are like evil animals that just can't help but kill. I think that's actually really reductive, and I wouldn't be an astrologer if I thought that way. I wouldn't be here talking to you guys in an act of hope, really. That's what this podcast is for me. I show up here and I get really honest with myself, and I try to be very honest and real with you, because I think that's how we move forward, is showing up with each other as human beings. And this is not a kumbaya thing. I've said it many times before, and I'm going to keep saying it because I don't like when people get the wrong idea about that. I don't think we have to let people, walk over us or exterminate us and not resist. I think we have every right to resist annihilation. And I know this is really heavy. We're only like 2 minutes into the podcast. And I promise this episode has a lot of joy in it. So I hope that if you are choosing to listen to this in real time, that you're taking care of yourself and you're doing what you can for the people that you are connected with, because that's how we move forward. That's truly how human beings are going to move through Pluto and Aquarius, is by working together. That is really at the heart of what I'm doing with this podcast. And I hope that over the course of the season, I've been able to show you what matters to me, and also what I really think we should be paying attention to as a collective. Because you and I, we may have never spoken before, but I want you to live your best life. I think that just because you are a human being, you deserve to be respected. You must be respected. And likewise, we should respect other people. We should connect with them and seek to understand each other and cooperate. I was thinking about Star Trek the other day, because I grew up in a household where the original series was a big thing. And fortunately, the universe aligned in such a way that I've had a significant amount of jobs on Star Trek series as a writer and also as a support staff person. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about Star Trek. I wouldn't consider myself a Trekkie, but I do like Star Trek. And a lot of people like science fiction. They like Star Trek. They like looking forward to these potential futures. And especially, that original series, that early time, it really was a very progressive media depiction of what the future could look like if human beings on Earth were not wrapped up in consumerism and hoarding resources and fighting one another over resources, engaging in supremacy over different groups of people. The shit that we do here now. The whole thing is that this magical future where people can get in these ships and fly light years across the galaxy and explore and make these other connections, right? That entire show is premised on the fact that human beings are cooperating to the point where they can even do that. That they have the resources to do that. I don't think people realize how much better off we could be if human beings work together, if we didn't have so much of the resources in the hands of this select few that is really doing a number on the rest of us. These arms dealers, the people that are invested in those arms dealers. Those are those things that these student protesters are taking a stand against, like all this money that is all getting poured into killing and destruction and suffering, and there's so much. It's so much bigger than Palestine. It's us. It's Sudan. It's the Congo. It's Haiti. It's Cuba. It's the whole fucking world has suffered because of this structure, this system. And we really do have this opportunity to work towards a better future by cooperating. I don't think that it's going to be like the TV show. I know that. Before, I just feel like somebody is always listening to be like, you know what? Gotcha. Like I said, I think science fiction is a beautiful thing because things like Star Trek do show an image, an idea. It is a fantasy, of course. It's a TV show. But that kind of thing can inspire us. Wouldn't something like that be cool? Like to cooperate and build on our existing technology so that people like live better? Poverty wasn't a thing. Like, we've done that as human beings before. Many societies have existed where you don't have to pay rent or have a mortgage or work 40 plus hours a week to get by. Like, all of this is human invention. All of this is made up, and that's not to devalue any of it, but that's to say nothing is set in stone. They will tell you that you can't do anything about it, just the way it is. Human beings are naturally evil. That's how I grew up anyway, with the Christianity that I grew up with. We were sinful from birth. And when you have this kind of perspective that people need to be controlled and subjugated and that somebody needs to be on top making sure that people just act right, and all of that serves to keep us small, keep us in our place. And we really have to think bigger than what's right in front of us. It's been some exhausting energy, like I said. We right now have Jupiter that just entered Gemini very recently. It's trine Pluto, and Pluto is in Aquarius, of course. So the energy of Pluto right now is very magnified, this transformative energy. And of course, Pluto is retrograde, so it's got a different flavor to it. But all this to say, it's big energy. We're stepping into places that we haven't been before. And that's always true of the future. But it's especially pronounced right now, this transformation that human beings are going through. And I hope that you are reflecting on the ways that you can do things that maybe you haven't done before. Because we're all going to have to do things that we haven't done before. We're going to have to be comfortable doing things that are outside of our comfort zone, because that is how we learn. That is how we grow. Gemini energy is not energy that stays in one place and does one thing all the time. Neither is Jupiter. Jupiter, by its very nature, has to expand in some way. If we don't expand, we stay where we are. We lose out on information and experiences that could lead us to something else, greater understanding at the very least. But with all this energy, and of course it's Gemini season, I hope that we are all considering where we can change it up, where we can experiment, where we can play with things. And as we talk about in this episode, not limiting yourself, expanding, actually doing the thing, trying something, maybe even failing, maybe even doing an okay job. Maybe it's just mediocre. Maybe it's not even a fail. That's all part of it. We are all going to have to try and maybe not get it right on the first time if we want to move forward individually and collectively. I guess my dog wanted to be on the finale. She's like now tap dancing next to me. So maybe that's the end of this little speech. But if you're feeling that transformative energy, if you're feeling pulled in different directions, and maybe there's not 100% clarity right now, but things are happening. There's movement there. There's energy there. You don't have to know exactly where it's going to go, but just understand that it's a lot. Let it be a lot. It's okay to rest, to take care of yourself, but it's also okay to stretch your limits a little bit. See what else is out there for you. Connect with other people. Start manifesting the future that you want to see in your own life, in your own day-to-day. That's how we get where we want to go. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Petty Astrology regulars Mackenzie Wollenzine, Kathy Sato, and Jen Russell for a conversation about Petty Astrology Season 2 and building confidence, speaking the language of astrology, and more. Then stick around for a heads up on the astrology of the upcoming week. All right, we have our Petty Astrology regulars here to celebrate the Season 2 finale of Petty Astrology Podcast. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good.
Doing all right.
Yeah, it's been kind of wild. This is episode 23. And then prior to starting the season, I don't know why I did it this way, but I started this season doing bonus episodes, which were our Britney Spears episodes. And that was like ushering us into season 2. So technically, this is like the 25th episode from this season, which is kind of wild. Like, wow, I've really made a lot of stuff for a while, but you guys got to be a part of quite a lot of these episodes. And I just think it's just funny that season 1 was just kind of like a fun experiment for us. Like, I really was not thinking I was about to start like a serious astrology podcast. And then we just had such a good time with it. And, I've gotten slammed a little bit by, random fools about like, oh my God, you would just do like a Love Island podcast. That's so like useless. And I agree. Like, in that sense, I don't think that anybody like needed a Love Island astrology podcast, to be honest. However, it's something that I watch and Kenzie and Jen watch as well. And like, it's just a way for me to turn off my brain a little bit, but it doesn't inhibit me from doing all the other things that I do, like caring about the world. So, I know for some people, like they, focus on that kind of thing and then real world stuff kind of falls by the wayside, but it hasn't played that way for me. But I really thought that like looking at Love Island for us was a really good learning exercise. Like, I know that sounds I don't know what we could have done differently is like what we watch C-SPAN and do a bunch of like politicians, like would that have been more valuable? I don't know because they're clowns too. So
Yeah.
That's a lot more boring, I'll tell you that much.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just like these are human beings that I'm watching and they're in a little pod. And so it was, I learned a lot from doing that. Learned a lot about making a podcast, learned a lot about astrology and just like playing with it and having fun with it. Oh my God, so terrible of us. But I just wanted to acknowledge that, yeah, it's a very different show than it was season 1 because I was not thinking that this was going to be what I do now. So I just want to honor the fact that it took a different turn and I think that's okay. Like I think it's okay to do things and experiment and have fun with it. Like it's not that fucking serious.
Mm-hmm.
Look
So
what it's grown into.
exactly. And I gave myself the room to play. And so many times, like, our good ideas start with us just playing and like enjoying ourselves, right? And then it grew into something that is deeper. And yeah, I do still talk about pop culture. I do think that people that dismiss pop culture as not having any relevance are like missing out on these things that play such a big influence in people's lives and in our psyches
Mm-hmm.
and reflect the culture so deeply. So like that's what I do on this podcast is like that's one of the reasons I called it Petty Astrology is like there are things that other people are like that's not fucking serious. That's not, that's not up to my standards, which I don't give a fuck. If this isn't up to your standards, go listen to one of the other 5 million podcasts that are out there. You know, I don't need to hear from you. I don't need to hear from you. If somebody has a gun to your head and is making you listen to this podcast, like I'm not the one that can help you with that, honey. But it is what it is. And I think that I'm really proud of what we've done this season and the way that we've been able to share astrology in a way that is both serious and also like lighthearted and fun. I think you can do both. I can. Not everybody's capable, but what are you going to say, So it started with Love Island and now we're here. So it was good for us. The duality of man, I don't know what to say. Like I'm a complex bitch. So the Britney Spears episodes came out, well, the first episode came out on the Sagittarius new moon. And then we just had the Sagittarius full moon on May 23rd, just a matter of days ago. We were like just now getting out of that full moon energy. So I'm like kind of tripping because I didn't plan. I was like, in December when I was like putting the podcast out, restarting it, in a serious way with the Britney Spears episodes. I just saw that the new moon was happening and I was like, okay, well, I want to put it on Wednesday. So perfect. New moon, new start, new chapter. And, Sag is publisher, like spreading the good word or whatever. So it really kind of thematically fit what I was trying to do with the podcast. And then now we're wrapping up season 2 and we just had this Sag full moon. And for those that aren't familiar, like a new moon in a certain sign, 6 months later, there will always be a full moon in the same sign. And that represents a cycle. It's like the 6 month cycle. And so for me, just looking at how dead on the astrology is for this one was really cool. I thought that was really cool. And yeah, I just, this has given me so much more confidence in like sharing what I know. I don't know. How has it been for you guys to be on petty astrology? Like, what's the tea?
It's been great. Like, I'm a much more comfortable speaking than I was when we first started. So I liked having that just lighthearted bit with the Love Island podcast because, I think we just needed to get comfortable like speaking and like learning how to podcast basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a skill. It's like you don't come out the womb knowing how to podcast.
Yeah, like I listen to a lot of podcasts, but that doesn't mean I know what I'm doing, And now,
Yeah.
especially having my own podcast, I'm like, okay, yeah, we're like getting a feel for it, speaking and sharing your ideas in a way that's like coherent, especially when it comes to something like astrology. It can be kind of hard to, I don't know, translate that into something that people can understand and connect with. But I think doing that through like pop culture is really helpful. So it's like a shared understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fully agree.
Yeah, it's been really cool to like look back on like all of our evolution like over the last, 6 months, but even like the year, like from the Love Island podcast. I feel like we were little like I don't know, just like little baby podcasters back then.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just been really cool to see like even how our own education and like just how we interpret things has evolved, and we've all kind of blossomed, it feels like, and it's been really cool.
Absolutely. I fully agree.
Yeah, serving cunty astrology.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. I've had a lot of fun. You create a really comfortable environment to discuss astrology and other things, and it's kind of like a scheduled hangout with everybody, and it just happens to be recorded. So it's pretty cool that we get to share it with everybody else. I always enjoy myself coming on your show.
Oh, that makes me so happy. I'm so glad. I really think that that might be one of my strengths is like creating safe spaces. I always tell guests when they come on the show that I want the audience to feel almost like they're eavesdropping on a conversation. And obviously we know that we're recording it. I really like that feeling to it. I like there to be an intimacy that the audience gets to be a part of in some way. And I think that that is such a thing that draws me to astrology, that it gives me a reason to talk to other people and explore other people in this way that I've always done. And I've said this many times before, but like astrology really has been the tool that allows me to do the thing I've done my whole life, which is observing people and studying people. It's very, in the past couple of years, I've realized like, oh, this is like my neurodivergence thing, is like this lifetime study of like what the hell people are doing and why and how I fit into the whole thing. And so, astrology was really the vehicle for me to do it in like a real way and, actually like keep tabs on this information and do something with it. So, this is just really an extension of that exploration. And it's just like, it's really cool for me to have a space now where I have so many thoughts. That's what I do all day is I think and I contemplate, and I just have all these ideas, and I've my notes app is just full of stuff. I'm a writer. I write everything down because there's just so much, and finally, like, I've created a space. I didn't realize, like, as a writer that has for a long time, like, other people have paid me to write things that aren't necessarily like my original idea, right? And so, like, having a space where I can put my ideas has been really cool too. So I just appreciate that the space exists, and like, I suspected that I could do it, but I think just like actually having a whole season done, I'm like, well, shit, I really could do I really could do it. And it's a confidence thing too for me as like somebody that I worked on shows, and I've not had the opportunity to be like in charge of my own show. And so just like seeing that I've been able to do it has been really confidence building, and yeah, it's just been awesome. So I was wondering, do you guys have a favorite petty astrology episode that you were in this season? Was there like one that you were like, that was fire?
I really liked the Taurus Scorpio episode. That was really fun and such a sleigh.
It was.
Same. I like that one, and then the Virgo Pisces one. I feel like we really popped off with those ones.
Right? Yeah, those were good. I really love that series too. I think it's such a fun way to talk about the signs, I think, in a way that, like, this podcast is not intended, my target audience is not necessarily like other astrologers. I want people that are interested in astrology that don't necessarily like have all of the study under their belt to be able to listen to the podcast and enjoy it. That's the
Hmm.
goal. And I feel like that has been a really approachable way for people to kind of go a little bit deeper. Everybody knows the signs, but talking about them a little bit more in depth and like what the energy is like without being like, you know, Scorpios are bad or whatever, whatever
Hmm.
They're
nonsense
Yeah.
we use.
scary.
Yeah, like, I hate them. Like, it's not really that helpful. And if you're listening and you're new, I'm a Scorpio. It's fine. Don't worry. You're fine. What about you, Kathy?
The Virgo Pisces episode or Aries and Libra.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Slay.
Yeah, for sure. That series.
It's
Yeah, for
it's a good
sure.
one. It's a good
Good
one.
stuff.
Do you guys have favorite episodes that you were not in, like that you had nothing to do with?
The episode you did with Carrie, I think, was my favorite one that you had a guest on, just because
Yeah,
I love
Medium Carrie
Carrie.
Wilson.
She's just so herself, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I hope we can get her on some more. You could drag her on because she's just so
Right? Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. I really liked your interview with Kendall and Mudong Jen. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
really liked all your interviews, and I don't know, they're always just so interesting. And I don't know, it's hard to pick a favorite because I like your solo ones too, you know?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was actually, I was a little bit nervous about those episodes where it literally is just me talking the whole time, because that was new. We started the first season and it was the three of us every single time. So I didn't have to sit and talk by myself, and it's just like a very different vibe. And so I'm patting myself on the back that I gave myself the chance to do that, because it's just a different feel to it, and I actually really like it. I love
Hmm.
having these conversations with you. I love having guests on, and having conversations, but I also, like, I just found that I actually had things to say by myself. So like, I wasn't sure how that was going to work, and yeah, I actually really enjoyed it. So, and the other thing is that, like, I love having guests on just as much as I love talking about pop culture stuff, because as I've been talking about, especially towards the end of the season, we put famous people, celebrities in the special category. And I do think, we can talk about them. I do talk about them, and I specifically in their relationship to the larger culture. But I think having, an interview with medium Carrie Wilson, and then, talking about somebody like Britney Spears, I think that what I am doing with this is that I want people to just see a spectrum of human beings. Because really, like, at the end of the day, I think that's one of the things that we can get from astrology. It's just like, you know, somebody that I know personally might not be somebody that is known widely. And, I kind of like putting them, one episode after the other, because I don't personally view them as like different people, entirely. Yes, they have different life circumstances and different histories, but like so does everyone else. So that's kind of been the thing that I found with it. I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing.
I like getting the little glimpse into your like Scorpio mind of like, picking people apart and analyzing all the little different pieces of them. Like,
Yeah.
makes a good astrologer and I think a good interviewer because you're just like genuinely interested in people.
Yeah, I really am. And it's funny because as much as I am pretty like shy as a person, I would say. Like if you don't know me, I'm not necessarily, taking up all the air in the room. I can definitely like get on my little high horse and, if I have an opinion or something comes up, absolutely. Suddenly the quiet person in the corner becomes very annoying.
Oh
if
my God, me too.
Yeah, it's like
Me
you
too.
say the wrong thing and it triggers something, and then I like more my morality is triggered. You're like, what, that bitch in the corner that was so quiet is suddenly not so quiet. And I guess that's kind of also what this podcast is. But yeah, I do find it very interesting to connect with people. The Scorpio in me is, I often am the observer, quietly just taking in information, and sometimes people don't even notice that I am noticing everything. That's how subtle it is, because I'm just doing, it's just me. That's just normal for behavior for me. It's just keeping an eye on things, and I notice every fucking thing I do. So I don't always remember it right off the top of my head, but it's all filed away. Just like collecting information. And yeah, it is exactly what I like to do. It's kind of what I do to myself too. I've done that my whole life, is like observing myself. And so just translate to other people. But that's kind of why astrology, I think, fit me
Mm-hmm.
so well. It's like, what else is there?
Yeah, I that's what I love about astrology too. It's like a framework to organize all this information that I get on other people, of being like, oh, okay, the
Mm-hmm.
way they, take action. Like I can look at their Mars sign, the things that they like want and need. You can look at their Venus, the way that their mind works, and maybe how I can communicate with them looking at their Mercury. Like it's all of these little pieces of things that I would observe in people, but having a framework to like slot that in and to like keep it organized and just to know that it works, like that's so crazy. But I don't know, that's the beauty of astrology, I guess. It's like my little filing system. It's the operating
Mm-hmm.
system in my brain now.
Literally. Yeah, I think that's the best way to explain it, is that once you get fluent in astrology, it's like it is the operating system. It's literally like the glasses that we see everything through. And we might not use that language, especially if we're talking to people that just don't give a fuck about astrology. Like there's no point in speaking a language to somebody that they don't understand, right? Like that's not going to be effective. So even if we're not saying astrological terms, and that's something that I do on this podcast all the time, I am always talking about the astrology. I might not be referencing exactly, the math behind it, which planet doing this, da, 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 but that's always what it is. And so I'm translating it. That's part of our jobs as astrologers, I think, that work with other people, is to translate, because as an audience member or a client, like you are not expected to know the astrology. Like that's just not your job,
Yeah.
unless you are also an astrologer.
Yeah,
But
this knowledge is hard won, and it hurt my brain
yeah.
so freaking much when I was learning, because those pathways in the brain, like it's, you're building new muscle basically in your brain. So it's wasn't always the most fun. I did have a lot of debilitating headaches and had to take it slow and just build it over time, because yeah, you can't have like a really good understanding, I think, of any language like astrology is by trying to rush things. It just unfolds over time. You just, get more vocabulary, get more experience, see more charts and people, and learn about all the different ways things can express other than like what's just in a book, because that's a good starting place. But then we got to get beyond that, because people are way more complex than just like any single sign or planet.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to dive into, which is why I will never run out of things to talk about on this podcast.
Yeah, lucky for
So,
everybody that listens.
right? Yeah, we'll keep going. And that's the other thing is that if you're hearing this and you're like, oh, it's the end of season 2, like, don't worry. Don't worry. Actually, this is a good point to mention that next week there will not be a new episode of Petty Astrology publicly available. I know. I'm so sorry. I'm going to be taking the week to start prepping season 3 because there are some different changes. It's going to sound a little bit different. We're going to have some different music. That was a little bit out of my hands, but it is what it is. So, we're going to have a special treat next week for listeners. Don't you worry. You will still get some great astrological information. And then I think I will do a bonus podcast for patrons. So, if you're a sponsor of this podcast, you will have an episode just for you, just for you. So that's something to look forward to. If you're not already a sponsor of this podcast, you can do so by joining us over on Patreon. It starts at $5 a month. So for the price of a fancy cup of coffee a month, you too can support your local astrologer and continuing to make petty astrology. Also, we have a really great community in the Patreon. You know, the kind of people that this podcast attracts are very thoughtful people that actually care about the world around them and, you know, hopefully like investing in it, investing their time in it, and, you know, just generally being more connected to other people in the world. So I think it's like a really great place for us to connect with each other, find each other, share resources, communicate, all of the above. So that's going to be there as well. And much more to come. I am going to be planning, you know, a lot more cool stuff for season 3. We also have our sister sign series. That's going to continue. That's going to continue. So it's going to be all the same stuff that you love about this podcast, just, you know, new season, new chapter, a little bit of a new flavor, and we will be loving it. We'll be loving it. So we have more exciting announcements too. Know I've had people in my Patreon ask, does Jen have a Patreon? Because people do want to support you and your podcast, which is Astrology Fight Club, where you can hear us talk even more about astrology. It's a lot more casual, I think, than petty astrology. It's like, I almost look at it as like our astrological green room. Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
backstage after the show or something, and we're just kind of unwinding. That's the vibes. So, Jen, tell us about your Patreon.
Yeah, I've been thinking about having a Patreon for a while since the Petty Astrology one launched. And I've been starting my podcast and been having a lot of fun doing that. And I just wanted to build my own community around it and have a place for people that enjoy what I have to say, what we have to say, to kind of support that work. And then I also launched my astrology discussion group. So we meet twice a month, and just if you want to yap with me about astrology, it's a lot of fun. We did it when I was teaching the natal chart foundations class and then intermediate astrology this year, and I had so much fun. Like my Sagittarius sun and Mercury just so lit up by having people that are also passionate about a subject that I love. Just having those conversations is like a good stepping stone beyond knowing just the basics. So that's basically, you know, the space where you can talk to other people about astrology and get dig in a little bit deeper on the ideas outside of just like taking a class. Because, you know,
Yeah,
there's only so many classes you can take before you need to like
right.
kind of like digest it with other people and put it into practice a little bit more. So I'm excited about that because I've been wanting to do that for a while. So if you want to join, my Patreon is Astrologer Jen Patreon.
Slay.
Well, I'll send you the link to it. There's other astrologer
Awesome.
Jens, but I'm the coolest one, so join mine.
Yeah, don't you worry. I am a patron myself, so I will be sure to include that link. And yeah, like Jen was saying, it's a language, so it's important to practice the language. Like that's how we have learned a lot. In addition to, you know, studying, taking a lot of classes, practicing, a big part of it has been the conversations that we have, sharing information about astrology, sharing resources. So if you're looking to go deeper into your astrological studies and have people to do that with, Jen is a wonderful teacher, and it's basically office hours. It's like you can go and practice talking to other people and going a little bit deeper into your understanding. So
Yeah, and just envision it as a place where if you have questions or need more resources, or if you're curious about a particular topic, like there's so much information online that can be inaccurate or just, a clickbaity in a way that's not helpful to somebody that's serious about learning astrology. So kind of separating out what is real, what is not, where can I go to get good information, and talking to other people. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. I loved office hours, so this is a way that I can keep doing that.
yeah, that's awesome. So I want to thank you guys so much for being a part of this season of Petty Astrology. I want to thank everybody that came on the podcast and just participated, but especially you guys, just because you were here so often and helped me, make this such a special place, I think, to learn about astrology and explore and go a little bit deeper. So thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Oh, I love what you've done with the place.
Thank you.
Mhm.
They grow up so
Yeah.
fast. I know.
Thanks for
Jeez.
having us. It's been, for real, so much fun.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. And I will be seeing you guys all back on season 3. Don't you worry. I haven't had enough of you guys, so we're going to keep doing the thing.
You're not going to kick us out?
So like I said, we've got Jupiter in an approaching trine with Pluto over the next few days. So that's kind of humming in the background of everything. This intensity, this sense of transformation that's happening for all of us in different ways. If you're listening to this the day that it comes out, May 29th is pretty interesting looking because we're going to have the moon squaring Uranus, and then right after that it's squaring with Jupiter, which is trine Pluto. So there's a lot of energy. It's a lot of intensified energy. It's a lot. Meanwhile, we have Mercury approaching Uranus, and so those two energies mixed together. I want to encourage people to really be aware of whatever thoughts you're putting in your head. So if you find yourself thinking in very defeatist ways, if you find yourself ruminating on things that aren't really helpful or encouraging, it's not to say to bypass those things or not deal with them, but maybe pace yourself in how you deal with them and when you deal with them. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself. This is also really great energy to look for a sense of inspiration. You might find that you just have some really interesting ideas pop in. You might also find that you have some tech issues going on, and that might be a little bit annoying. But definitely don't get stuck in your head. That is the big headline with this energy. If you are finding yourself spinning around in anxiety or worry or concern over things that really aren't in your control, you want to make sure that you move your body, that you remember your breathing. You remember that you're a physical being having a physical experience. And it may be difficult to feel totally grounded, but we don't need to reach for perfection in those moments, right? We just need to get ourselves into a level space where we're better able to make decisions. If we're in a panic or we're spinning around in our head, it's not necessarily the best energy to act on. If you're somebody who has a tendency to look at the things that are uncomfortable or unsatisfying to you and just focus on those, I get it. That's a very human thing to do, but catch that, nip that in the bud when you find yourself doing that, and try to find as much appreciation in whatever situation you're in as you can. And that doesn't mean lie to yourself or force anything, but if you're working and you're I don't really like this job, try to find the little things that you enjoy, or try to add some things to the situation if you can that make it more enjoyable for you. Just in a general way, I feel looking at this week, it is a very progressive week. And that's not to say it's going to be easy all the time for everyone, of course not. But it looks like there's a lot of opportunities here to have clarity about how you want to move forward in a more long-term way, and also in terms of your thinking. Because like I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, it is important for us to have these ideas, and even if they are fantasies, we can acknowledge that they're fantasies, but we can allow those to shape our idea of what is possible. So if you can let what you know and what you've experienced and what you've built so far be its own thing and take those lessons from there, but understand that you can do more. You can do different things. You can add to it. You can grow. You can expand. You can take a totally different direction if you want to. And then pair it with opportunities that you're finding yourself having or entertaining in this particular moment. There is this real chance to progress this week or get that ball rolling in a major way. Right now, we're kind of at the tail end of this Mars in Aries transit, so it's still a great time to act on your vision in a way that's authentic to you. And it's not to say that you can't do it after this, but it's great starting line energy. And then Mars moves into the sign of Taurus on June 8th. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to be activated here and really start taking some steps on the things that maybe you've been just thinking about up till this point. The things that maybe earlier this week you've been getting some clarity about. It could fold together very nicely. And then we've got Mercury making its way into Gemini. That's happening on June 3rd. And of course, with Jupiter there and it's trine Pluto, it is very dramatic energy. This is another place where we don't want to be overthinking. We don't want to be telling ourselves stories that are really negative and probably not even true. Just because something is harsh doesn't mean it's true. So this is a really big week to work on shifting your mindset. That's like your homework from me if you're looking for some. Shift that mindset. Shift it to understanding that so much is possible. That's one of the beauties of astrology, is opening these roads of possibility. And as a human being, you have free will. You do get to steer that course for yourself. So, be open to realizations about the direction that you're taking, the thoughts that you've been having, and maybe ways that you can speak to yourself better in more constructive ways. And also be open to the fact that you might be going in a different direction than you expected. You might have even manifested something even better than you thought you could have. But we really don't know until we start taking those steps. We make the moves. If we just sit in the same place and just let life happen to us, we lose out on a lot. We lose out on the ability to create a future that we're actually excited about, instead of a place where a lot of people are miserable and suffering. And Mercury in Gemini, I'm very excited for because, wow, I'm sure that I will be yapping away. People will be having all kinds of ideas. I hope we have some really interesting cultural conversations. And it's Pride Month, so of course the discourse will be piping hot. So, oh God, pray for us. Pray for us gays. Not in the hateful Christian way, of course. It's a joke. It's a joke. We also have a very exciting new moon in Gemini happening on June 6th. I have my new moon manifesting circle that meets every month. I get you ready for the new moon. I tell you how to use the energy to manifest the things that you're looking to build in your life. And I make it really easy to understand. You do not have to know very much about astrology at all to benefit from the group. And it's also a really great, loving, supportive community in a very gentle, respectful way. So if you are interested in joining us this month for the Manifesting Circle, we're meeting on June 2nd at 4 p.m. Pacific time on Zoom. And that all happens through Patreon, which is linked in the show notes. In preparation for season 3, I'm going to be taking next week off of the public podcast, but I'm not going to leave my patrons hanging. So if you are a sponsor of this podcast, you will be getting a special new moon episode where I give you the rundown on this new moon in Gemini. So if you'd like access to that and the other bonus episodes that I've done already, you can join us on Patreon. And I'm going to be announcing a new bonus podcast series that I'm doing with a very special collaborator, so stay tuned for that. Patrons will be the first to hear about it. And of course, you can join Patreon for free and you get all of those updates too. Speaking of patrons, I want to give a very special thank you to all of the past and present sponsors of this podcast. Without the sponsors, this podcast would not exist in the way that it does now, and you are helping to make the podcast what it is and to help me make it better. So I wanted to give a shout out to all of our current patrons. We've got Olivia, Rosemoon, Elise, Mimi, Austin, Jessica, Iona, Zach, Alicia, Spencer, Crystal, Allison, Delinia, Raquel, Alexis, Ren, Eli, Savannah, Jamie, Patricia, Angie, Kendall, Alexandra, Taylor, Lorena, Burjay, Brooke, Alyssa, Samantha, B, Lori, Carrie, Rebecca, Anita, Bethany, Kim, Shelby, Anita, Elena, Andrea, Max, Catherine, Jen, Mackenzie, Nick, Shane, and Lori. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to have you as members of the Petty Astrology community, and I'm really excited to see how we make it grow. Season 3 of Petty Astrology starts on June 12th, and if you're looking for more Petty Astrology before then, you can find us over on Patreon. This episode was produced by Carrie Wilson and Lori Rivers and brought to you by my sponsors over on Patreon.